The Dyslexia Duo wants to know, do you want to get your name out there? Well, we can help you gain brand awareness. We build better brands simply by taking your own vision for your business and helping it reach a wide variety of audiences.
Benefits to advertising on the Dyslexia Duo podcast include direct access to a diverse audience of parents, caregivers, and educators, association with experts in the field. Also, continuous traffic to the podcast means repeated exposure to your brand. You will be supporting a small business that advocates for children's education and options available to obtain measurable results.
Just contact us either through Facebook at The Dyslexia Duo or through email, thedyslexiaduo@gmail.com.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Amy.
And Melissa. We are a couple of retired Texas teachers who are CALTs, Certified Academic Language Therapists. We started our own businesses, and now we have a podcast called
The Dyslexia Duo. So join us for our informative podcast, where we'll delve into dyslexia, covering the topics that affect parents, therapists, teachers, practitioners, and anyone who wants to learn more. We'll guide you through everything you need to know, from the first signs to the intricacies of dyslexia curriculum placement and beyond.
This season, we will cover the referral process, what to expect when your child or student is dyslexic, the generational impacts of dyslexia, and how to support those affected.
Come join us! Thank you for rejoining us while we continue our conversation with Sue Hegland.
You've talked a lot about the morphology and how it supports spelling. How does it also support reading? I know we touched on it a little bit.
When we're reading, one of the goals of structured literacy teaching is to have kids be able to read words that they've never seen before. Mm-hmm. And that we can do a lot towards accomplishing that, right? But we can't necessarily do that for every single word. As adults, I'm sure you have the same experience. You run into a word every now and then and go, I better look that word up. I don't know what it is. So we might still have to look words up. But if students are used to seeing like an AL suffix on a word, and then they learn that forms an adjective, and they understand that they need to kind of look at what comes before it. Like, let's say they encounter the word dental, dental. And they are used to thinking about structures, and they take that AL off in their mind and say, what, D-E-N-T, dent. Oh, I wonder if that's related to a dentist, right? So they're beginning to recognize that we have all these word families that use different suffixes, different prefixes, but the same base, and they'll begin able to expand that. The other thing is, once you encounter a new word, you might have to look it up, but if you know how to put it together, it's much easier to have that word become more, you can more quickly learn new words as you encounter them. So sometimes you can just see a word you've never seen before, make sense of it, but you can also learn new vocabulary and build your vocabulary for reading more quickly if you have this understanding.
I love to hear about this because I think it's so cool to think about how morphology plays a part into reading, into spelling, and really vocabulary development. It's the big papa.
Absolutely. Well, I have a colleague or a friend who said, with this type of study, it's buy one word, get lots more for free. Because you can analyze a word and suddenly have all kinds of other words that make sense to you. And you can also kind of get into words and see a little bit more about what they mean. One of my favorite words for that is secretary. Now, people don't talk about secretaries as much, it's an administrative assistant, that kind of thing, but we still have like Secretary of the Navy, we have Secretary of State. How do we use that word? Well, there's an ARY suffix that we can take off of that, SECRET, ARY. And what are you left with? The word secret. Mm-hmm. And secret and secretary are related because historically, a secretary was someone who could keep the secrets of the person they were working with or working for.
Oh my gosh.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
So, and then In secretary, it's kind of hard to know how to spell it because we have those neutral vowels, but secret is a little easier. And we start adding other suffixes and prefixes, we might be able to figure out more about how all of that fits together.
So if you were to teach secretary using the structured language process, would you teach it as the base word is secret and add the airy?
Well, I would definitely, one option is you could treat secret, S-E-C-R-E-T, as the base. I think there's a chance that can be analyzed a little bit further within the S-E coming off, but I'm not positive. And I don't have to be positive to do this. I can say, I do know this part. I know S-E-C-R-E-T. I think I said that right. We're going to treat that as the base. We're going to add this ARY suffix. And then that ARY is going to show up in other words like honorary or other words. So we begin to see how we use that unit over and over again in words. And you build this kind of bank of affixes. Affixes is the term for prefixes, suffixes, and then sometimes we have connecting vowel letters. And those show up all over the place as we begin to look at word families. It's hard to do this while we're talking because I'd love to show you 5 matrices and be looking at them together.
It's really cool. Thank you.
No, this is great. So while we were talking, because we're going to get into etymology, and I'm so scared I'm going to say entomology, which I know the difference. So I pulled it up on my app so I wouldn't say the wrong thing. What can understanding of the study of etymology or even the word origin help for their spelling knowledge? We touched on it a little bit with the French words, right? But how else can we support? I mean, we can pull in the matrices, but it's hard to do a language lesson every time we do spelling.
You can't, right? You just don't have time. But first of all, I have to tell you this. So etymology and entomology are really easily confused. And one of the things that's cool, I learned this a while back, but entomology, which is about insects,
yes,
kind of a similar structure to insect, except insect came from Latin and entomology came from Greek. And it has an en, which is this idea of in, like the in. It has a tom, which is the idea of cut. And it's the same thing that's in like appendectomy or anatomy or these other words. So sometimes when you have words like that that easily get confused, you can, again, do a little study, get a little matrix, understand the difference and see why one is spelled the way, and it makes it stick much more. So that was just...
And blame the Greeks.
Yeah, blame the Greeks.
I'm just kidding. I'm Greek myself.
Oh, are you really? There's that.
Half Greek.
Everything goes back to the Greek.
Everything goes back to the Greeks, for sure.
With etymology, then another thing is it becomes a tool that the teacher can use to try to make sense of words that don't make sense. One of the words I like to use is the word yolk, Y-O-L-K, like the yolk of an egg. So we can make sense of the Y, we can make sense of the O, we can make sense of the K, and we have a word like we're going to yoke two things together, that's Y-O-K-E. So what is the L doing there? Well, if you look at the etymology of the word, the history of the word, you learn that that word came from a word that meant yellow.
Oh.
That has an L in it, yellow. And the L sort of stayed with it as it came into English. And so if you think about the fact that the yolk is the yellow part of the egg, it gives you a way to understand why that L is there. It's not pronounced in that word. So it's a grapheme, it's part of the word, but we can call it a marker, an etymological marker, because it's not representing a phoneme. And so it allows us to help explain why that's there. The same thing is true with the L in the word talk. That L is related to the L in tail and tell.
Oh.
Tell, tale, and talk, right? Isn't that cool?
Oh my gosh. I'm sitting here thinking I want to do lessons like this with my kids.
And yes, and the thing is, you don't have to know every single word, but if you have a set of these that you can teach kids and you can have them understand, it becomes something where they start to get curious about it and they know that it's possible. So there's a lot of words like this where you probably have heard, many people are hearing that the word TWO has that W in it, not because of pronunciation, because we know we can spell two with just a T and an O. We can spell two with just a T and a double O, like it's too cold in here. But then there's this TWO. And why is it there? Well, it's like a remnant of history. And the word two, TWO, came from an older word where we probably pronounced that W, and it's still pronounced in words that are related in present day English that have to do with this idea of two, like twin, twice, 12. What's 12? It's 10 plus 2. What's 20? Yeah. 10 times 2. Even the word twig. The word twig came from the same ancestor that meant two, because when you have a twig on a tree and it starts growing, it often splits into two as it grows. Isn't that cool? I love your face right now.
That is the coolest thing.
So we really could say two.
You could say twirl, right? But kids are not going to remember that. You can say, but if you teach them twin, right? What is a twin? A twin is when someone is born and there are two of them born on the same day to the same mom, right? And they can use the tw in twin, because how many times have you seen kids write the word two and they say t, oo, o? Okay, I know there's a W in there, and they just sort of stick
W,
it,
yes.
Right? And it becomes TOW.
All the time.
But now they have a way to know that the W comes right after the T. Twin, oh yeah, that W needs to go right there. So it helps them understand these words in ways that we can't do with just dealing with pronunciation.
I'm so excited to start lessons with my kids now.
Well, tomorrow.
I mean, tomorrow, for sure.
This is why spelling bee contestants always ask for the etymology of a word.
Do. Right. And, we've always taught kids in structured literacy that, there's that Greek CH and PH, and all that sort of thing. And that can be very helpful, but it also is helpful to then take a base like that comes from Greek and then do a whole bunch of words around it. So you can combine the etymological study or the understanding that comes from, okay, that word's from Greek, so we're going to use that PH, and then a lot of practice building in the morphology so they get a chance to automatize that.
I can't tell you how excited I am.
So, and this is why I say, I'm not telling you how to teach this. I'm showing you things that are true about the language.
You're leading the horse to water.
Well, you're going to be, are great teachers, so you're going to figure out how to teach this tomorrow, but now you know what you want to teach. Right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so I also wanted to know, instructors are sometimes unaware of how to instruct in spelling outside of spelling lists. So what do you think is a good way for teachers to gain knowledge on how to instruct in spelling?
I think that we're used to thinking about teaching kids to spell by collecting a group of words that either they may not have any connection in terms of their structure at all. We may have a list of words that use the same spelling pattern. But what I think is really powerful is to take this idea of morphological families and use that as part of our spelling instruction. So, for example, we might, if we're working with kids that are ready for something like insect or sector or something like that, then we could introduce this week a base, SECT, and let kids look at that. I'll send you a matrix for SECT along with whatever else I'm going to send you, because they might then look and be able to say, well, I want to learn how to spell section and insect and dissecting. Those are kind of cool. So maybe I'm going to work on those words. Or maybe you give all the kids the same words, but they're all built around the same base. And for your students who are having more trouble with spelling, as you do more and more of this, the prefixes and the suffix get automatized early on. And with the orthographic mapping concept, the idea is you you start with that phoneme grapheme connection, but as you get further along, the thing that Lene Airy says is you begin to kind of put them together into units. She talks about syllables, but she also talks about morphemes. And those morphemes become automatized so that they don't have to remember or sound out how to spell an ION or an ING or an RE prefix. And so those become things they can use that are already there. And now they're just adding that understanding of the base, and they're seeing how the pronunciation is changing. So you could build that around, you could do spelling with that. The other thing I encourage teachers to do is if they know that the morphology is going to be important, like let's say you're having a student who consistently misspells says. So on a spelling test or an assessment or their practice, rather than have them just write the word, tell them they need to write the word sum. Give them points for each part of the word sum, right? Mm-hmm. If you get the base right, you get a point. If you get the suffix right, you get a point. If it's something that involves a suffixing convention, if you mark the suffixing convention, you get a point. And then if you spell the word right, you get a point. So it's not just getting the word right. It's helping them become better at using and understanding the system so that you're encouraging that thinking in a more systematic way, and they can be more successful. I mean, it's sort of like with math. If you have a math problem, I remember it was always the case that you don't want kids to just do the answer as you get into more advanced math. You get points for showing your thinking, showing your process. My kids always hated that. Show your work.
Yeah.
It's more work, but it also is important because then you can see where the breakdown is in the understanding. And it makes it more likely that they're going to actually get it right because they have to really work through each step in the process and think about it. So
thinking about all the things that we've talked about today, I can remember when my kids are adults now, and my oldest is almost 30, but I remember when he went to middle school and I just had littles, with me, and we're doing spelling lists. And so he goes to 6th grade and I go, "Where's your spelling list?" And he goes, "I don't have one." I said, "What?" And I called the teacher and she goes, "We don't do spelling lists in secondary." And I remember thinking, why not? So why do you think they stop with spelling instruction in secondary?
That's an interesting question. I think we think of maybe spelling as a more kind of foundational, basic thing. And once you get that down, you get the phonics down, you're good to go. But what I think makes a lot of sense is to integrate this into vocabulary work, because kids need to keep learning more and more and more words, especially academic language. And a lot of the academic language uses these Latinate base elements or these Greek base elements that are very productive and very consistent. And so I can remember when my kids were in school, my daughter had this orange vocabulary book that she would use, and she had to, learn certain words each week, and I would help her with that. And I remember like the word collude came up one week, and the word illusion came up another week, or eluding or whatever. So there would be like ELUDE and there would be ALLUD, and all of those have the same base. So while there was never any connection between them, but you could take vocabulary study and you could start building so that you're kind of integrating the vocabulary into what really becomes spelling instruction and also comprehension instruction. I remember her coming home and I was testing her, and one of the words she had to learn was diaphanous.
Oh my gosh.
So that was one of her in like junior in high school or something, diaphanous. Oh. And so I tested her on that and she said flimsy. And I said, well, it's not really flimsy. I mean, that really doesn't capture diaphanous. I'm thinking of a diaphanous gown, right? It's kind of flowy, but she was just given like a one-word definition, diaphanous. And so the thing that this type of study does is it lets you go a lot deeper in understanding what is going on with a word like diaphanous. I think that's related to like phantom or something, like something you can barely see. So there's all kinds of interesting ways that this type of thinking about the language helps build vocabulary and allows students to keep learning to spell, but also build their academic vocabulary at the same time.
So that kind of leads me to my next question. So I think about the kids that I've worked with in elementary school. They come to me in elementary school and they have a list that is all the words spelled with long O sound.
Right.
So they might have all the different graphemes that represent the long O, OW, all of those different things. I don't feel that they do as well with their reading progress when they're following that type of spelling pattern as they do with maybe a list that goes along with the conventions that they've learned through the structured literacy instruction that I've provided to them if we work together with the teacher. What are your thoughts on that informal observation?
Well, I think that is a really good observation, and I certainly have seen the same thing. So the traditional approach in structured literacy was you would teach one pattern at a time, and you would teach it kind of to automaticity, if you will, and then you wouldn't confuse the kids by bringing it, so like one long O pattern, and then you might do a couple other things. You might be teaching PH for whatever, and then you come back to the next long O pattern. And there is some value in that, except that it's still, when you bring them both together, kids still may not know which one to use and why. So that's why a lot of what I'm talking about today is helpful. So if you give them a chance to learn both patterns, as best you can, help them understand why one or the other is in the word, that's very helpful. There is a movement that I'm seeing now with the whole speech to print and structured linguistic literacy approach about bring them all in at once. And I think that can be a little bit confusing as well, because it's too much all at once. But I don't think you should be relying on just separating them either. I think one of the things I really think is important is understanding that there are one or two patterns typically that are the standard. So, for example, to spell an it's almost always going to be an E. Right? And then in some words, it's an EA, right? Like in health, right? So we have I held something, and we have health where we use EA. But often those EAs are in, not always, but often they're in words where we have a change in pronunciation. So we have health and heal. We have dealt, I dealt the deck of cards, and I will deal the deck of cards. So we can sort of learn those as patterns. But often I see people saying, well, the ways we spell would be E and EA, and then AY and says, and AI and said, and all these other A and NE, and all of those other ones, other than E and EA, we can explain by looking at morphology and looking at related words and helping kids understand them. So I think we want kids to know that it's a one-to-many system. And I don't think there's any value in just saying, well, E spells I mean, I think we can say E can spell and you're going to learn other ways, and we'll talk about why when we get there. E is the most common, and we're going to practice that and learn that now. And then when you move on to another one, same sort of thing. So I think we have to balance having them understand how the system works, but not overwhelm them, and as much as possible, help them understand why.
That sounds great. Thank you for that explanation.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Melissa with Kids First Dyslexia Services. I am excited to share with you my private practice. Kids First Dyslexia Services is a private practice that specializes in dyslexia therapy. Each one-on-one session focuses on instruction specific to your child's needs in a nurturing environment that develops self-esteem, builds confidence, and fosters a sense of accomplishment, resulting in happier kids with higher levels of achievement. We provide a professional, personalized experience, always putting the child first. We value the relationships with both our students and parents, because strengthening skills and overcoming hurdles to achieve desired goals and success is a team effort. For more information, please visit www.kidsfirstdyslexia.com. That is www.kidsfirstdyslexia.com.
Hi there. This is Amy Rodenroth, owner of Discovery Dyslexia Services. So tell me if any of these situations are familiar to you. Your dyslexia teacher/therapist has suddenly retired unexpectedly, and you do not have the personnel to fill the space. Or you do not have enough trained teachers or therapists for the number of students who have qualified for dyslexia services, and you need a trained teacher or therapist quickly, like yesterday quickly. Or you need a teacher to provide compensatory services, and you do not have anyone that can provide what's needed. Well, what do you do? I'm going to tell you what you can do. You can call Discovery Dyslexia Services. Discovery Dyslexia Services can help you with your various dyslexia concerns. We have multiple CALs who can provide virtual small group therapy. We can also train your teachers in most dyslexia curricula, either virtually or on site. Just let us know how we can help support you. For more information, go to our website at www.discovereed.com. Let me spell that for you. DYSCOVEREAD.com. I don't know, it's a funny name, but we're providing huge services for our dyslexic population. So keep in mind, Discovery Dyslexia Services, covering all your dyslexia needs. Let's return to the show. So, kind of going along with that, what I've seen in my past settings, now teachers are kind of getting better about understanding the spelling rules and understanding reading rules that go along with it. But I'm not sure if they know how to teach spelling. I still see they give the kids a list of 10, 15 words Monday. They say, put them in alphabetical order, write the consonants in blue and the vowels in red. I mean, it's not really, this is busy work. And then they have the assessment on Friday. I would love to be able to support those classroom teachers in spelling. And I don't think they're always getting it in college. And certainly whatever spelling system they're using doesn't always offer that support. So what would be a good way for teachers to gain, in some cases quickly, to gain that spelling knowledge that they need to help support their students?
That's why I wrote the book that I wrote. Was to try to help support that. I've given lots and lots of talks. If you go to my website, which is learningaboutspelling.com, there's a further resources page, and there's lots of links to talks and articles and things like that you can read. I really do think that the first step is learning more about these topics that we've been talking about today and thinking about learning and kind of expanding our understanding of the importance of morphology. The point of a written word is to help us immediately identify it. And so there are things in written words that don't have anything to do with pronunciation. And the more teachers learn about that, the more they are able to share that with their students. And I love the matrix and the word sum as tools. I love the idea of anchoring a lot of its spelling instruction around, say, a morphological family, a base family, rather than a random set of words, or even just words that all have a long O sound in them. Yeah. So those are some ideas, but it does take a little bit of time to get comfortable with this. It's not something where you can, just pick up something and do it tomorrow. But it's the old saying is bite by bite, you can eat an elephant. And that's true here, right?
Right. So I remember asking my daughter, and I said, well, how do you eat an elephant? Oh. And she just looked at me, and I thought, uh-oh, she doesn't know this saying. And she goes, with a fork and a knife. I thought, oh my gosh, why would you eat an elephant? What are you talking about, Mom? I'm talking about my problems here. Kind of along the eating the elephant thing, do you think using their writing is a good way to determine what words or even word forms that should be worked on?
Yes, looking at student spelling is the best way to assess what they need to learn about spelling, because you can see what they're not sure about. And you can also, as a teacher, if you're thinking, I want to explain this word to my student, and you're not sure how to, that is also a good kind of prompt to say, I want to go see if I can figure out what's going on with that one. This type of word study is really nice to do with colleagues. And as people get, in a school or a particular grade, people working together on how do we improve our spelling instruction? What can we do? That can often be very helpful, because then you're not trying to do all of these things on your own. You're building your knowledge with your colleagues and the people you're doing this with.
Perfect.
Okay, so you said earlier that English is a highly logical language. So do you believe that there are irregular words in our language?
Well, so when we say something is irregular, it implies it's not following the rules, obviously, right? So if we look at a word like yacht, Y-A-C-H-T, I think, I can't necessarily explain that word without going into the story of it and looking at it. Or, there are certainly some words that are a little more difficult. But a lot of the words that we define as irregular, like says, like does, those words are not irregular for spelling. They are perhaps unexpected in terms of their pronunciation. But that's because we are expecting that the spelling is going to be directly one-to-one connected to the pronunciation. Mm-hmm. And once we look at the structure, they're not so irregular. So when you take into consideration morphology and you take into consideration these signals in words, like the L in the word talk, or the L in the word yoke, or the W in the word answer, those all have reasons for being there, and they don't have anything to do with pronunciation. So once you understand that, are those words irregular? Well, they're not really irregular in terms of doing the job that the spelling system is supposed to do. They're just not fitting the model that we've all grown up thinking is the way the system is supposed to work. The word I prefer to use with words is like an anomaly, something that's not what we expect, right? But it's not that it's regular or irregular. It's that there are certain patterns, and then there are some words that have their own reasons and their own stories behind them.
So if there are these types of words, would you recommend giving the student an assessment to see what words that they might miss on this assessment of words like does, said, talk, etc., and then figuring out what words they miss and put it on a frequently misspelled word list that they can study and try to master?
Yes, we want kids to automatize these words. So for sure, we want to do that. But what I would encourage you to do is, wherever possible, rather than having them memorize the word, having them find a way to explain the word. Okay. So this is where a word sum would come in. So, if they're misspelling says and does and been, B-E-E-N, they would, instead of just writing the word, they would be getting it. You would want them to be writing a word sum for it so they can see the structure. I will be, B-E, and then that en suffix, the same suffix we have on eaten and taken. I will eaten, I will take, I have taken, I will be, I have been. And notice the pronunciation shift, but work on the spelling. And then a lot of, as you get into longer words, the same thing is true, because the structure is going to help you understand why each and every letter is in that word. We have words like separate. If a student's trying to spell separate, there's a lot of those vowels at the end. They can get the se, but then prit, separate, right? But the base is P-A-R-E. There's a prefix S-E that has this idea, just sense of apart, and then P-A-R-E, which is a base that's in lots of words and means kind of make ready. So when you're separating something, and it's the same P-A-R-E that's like paring an apple, P-A-R-E, you're going to pair an apple. So that family could be something that you would study, and there could be 2 weeks of spelling words out of that. Mm-hmm. And a student who misspells a word like separate or definite has a base F-I-N-E, and it's the same base that's in like infinity and finite and finish and final. And so all of those words could be connected to that one word that they're misspelling. If they're misspelling definite, rather than just have them memorize those vowels, have them understand it by working with a morphological family.
Oh my gosh.
It's incredible.
Oh my gosh.
We got to get to work, Amy.
Oh.
And the thing about this is, honestly, it's so intimidating for teachers sometimes to think about, how do I get started? Or a parent who's like, I don't know anything about this. I think the goal is to have students understand how the system works. And these words that we're talking about are all examples. No one is going to know all of these different examples. I've been doing this for 15 years now, where I've really been trying to learn more and more about this kind of thing. But if you just start with a few words and you understand that this is so important, you can build your knowledge over time. So
I think it seems a little daunting to think about doing this with dyslexic kids.
Well, dyslexic kids, to be honest with you, are the kids who need it the most. Oh. They need it the most.
I can understand that.
Now, why do you think it's daunting? What about it feels daunting?
I think because I'm in my mindset of teaching them the grapheme phoneme correspondence.
Right.
And will it be confusing for them to now add in this other piece?
Well, see, that's a very interesting question and observation. So first of all, there are a lot of people who are working with this with kids who are extremely dyslexic, and they find that it makes it make more sense. You do need to teach the phoneme grapheme relationships, right? But think about how much easier it would be to teach the phoneme grapheme relationships in the word fine, F-I-N-E, right? So you've got the F, you've got the long I, you've got the N, you've got the E, fine. Okay, now that is a word, but it also is a base, F-I-N-E. And now I can begin to add to it. So now I add D-E, and what do I get?
Define.
Define, right? And the deep sense of that base, what I call the orthographic denotation, is end or limit. So when you define something, you put some limits around it, right? Now, that's not the meaning of the word, but it can kind of help connect it to that. Then you add a prefix con instead, and you get confine, right? Now, con in confined sounds like maybe there's a U there, right? And for a dyslexic student who's having trouble with, first of all, the phonemes might be a little fuzzy, right? But then they have a hard time just remembering that it's an O or instead of a U, but they learn that con prefix, they're going to use it over and over again. Right. And then you get to define becomes definite, and then you put in an in on and you add an ite and you get infinite. And so the dyslexic student who really needs to learn the phoneme grapheme relationships, they get a nice solid practice with that fine in confine, define, but then they're learning how to reconstruct things. And I'll tell you, for my son who's dyslexic, building things was never a problem. Constructing things was always easy. It was sounding them out was driving him crazy. Okay. And so it is giving them concrete tools. And you're going to teach the phoneme grapheme relationships, and you're going to teach the different ways that a given grapheme can be pronounced. And you're going to teach them, oh yeah, there are different ways that we can spell that, whatever that particular sound is, but it's going to be anchored on something that they can understand. And one thing I know about dyslexic kids is they're great at understanding. They're not so good at hearing the sounds, right, and remembering it. And every child is different, but often that phonemic awareness is challenging, and often the orthographic memory is challenging. I think you guys talked to Nancy Mather, didn't you? And she was talking about those kids that have that kind of weaker orthographic memory, and this really supports those dyslexic students.
Wow. I'm really excited to give it a try. I think I'm going to try it with my older kids first, though.
Well, yeah, go ahead. But you might be surprised. The younger ones might really, really jump on it because they have not already developed this kind of sense of it's supposed to be sounded out. So,
okay,
do whatever feels natural to you. But I would encourage you, give it a shot, even with the younger ones. Nothing complicated, but just helping them understand words and see how the system works.
Okay. Thank you, Sue.
So now I'm seeing what critical pieces I've been leaving out of my instruction. And so now I'm reworking in my head what I need to do when I work with my students. So I kind of love this. So we're going to go on. We're kind of wrapping it up a little bit. Our listeners love it when our speakers can provide resources like books that inspire you, in addition to your own writing, articles, researchers, authors, things like that. Websites. What would you like to refer the listeners to?
Well, first of all, I definitely have a couple of books that I would recommend. One is written by a colleague of mine, and it's called Back Pocket Words. And so if you find these stories of words interesting, she wrote a book. Her name is Gail Venable, and she wrote a book where she was taking words and showing their structures and their stories. And often they were words that you would never think would be related to one another. So that's a really interesting read. And it's something that teachers can just read a chapter at a time. It's not really serial. It's just you can pick it up and just read one just for interest. There are a whole bunch of people who study the same sort of orthographic system, if you will, who talk about being part of doing structured word inquiry. Have you heard of structured word inquiry? Pete Bowers, who kind of coined that term, and then a lot of people who use structured word inquiry. Now, structured word inquiry is used sometimes as a term for both the understanding of the orthographic system and then a particular way of studying it. I'm much more of an advocate for structured literacy, but when you look at structured word inquiry, it's a great way to learn about these topics. And many people do teach using kind of a somewhat inquiry-based approach, but many people also do it in a systematic way. And a couple colleagues just wrote a book called Structured Word Inquiry, an implementation guide for teachers. And I can send you a link to this, Jennifer Constantine and Kara Lee. And it's really it gives teachers an actual kind of roadmap to kind of do a lesson, you know, what you would listen. So it's really great. And I think your listeners would be interested in that.
I'm interested in that.
Yeah, I think you would find it. That is a resource that's just come out in the last couple of weeks. I also really like, for vocabulary, there's a great book by Elfriede Hebert, who's a researcher, and it's called Teaching Words and How They Work. And she has a website also called textproject.org. And she's been doing research for decades, and she has a lot of really nice free resources on that website. She's done a lot of kind of decodable books that don't do the kind of decodable where it's like, you know, Ted did run kind of thing, where it's hard for kids to even make sense of it because it uses, like, we don't say Ted did run, we said Ted ran, or, you know, whatever. So she's responded to a lot of that and done a lot of work on vocabulary, and she incorporates a lot of morphology into her work. So that's another book I recommend. And then if you go to my website, learningaboutspelling.com, there's a whole further resources page that has lots of recommendations of resources and classes and Facebook groups and all kinds of things that can help people learn more about all of this.
Thank you so much. And I'm a big Facebook person. One of my trainees told me it's because I'm old.
Yeah, they like to tell us that.
I was like, you remember who's grading you. But yeah, no, I love stumbling across Facebook groups that support this type of thing. So I think that would be great. Thank you.
In fact, there's one that's a relatively new one called Morphology Teachers Hub that I need to add to it. But then there's one called Structured Word Inquiry and Structured Word Inquiry in the Classroom. And all of these involve lots of discussions about word study that might be of interest to you.
Okay,
And
thank
we
you.
spoke with somebody at the conference who came on to our podcast as a guest, and she has a morphology teacher's kit. Or toolkit. It's called Toolkit. And she was talking all about how this kit has really helped her and people who have worked with her getting this kit. It's just, she said it's just been wonderful. So
she may be the person who's the host of the Morphology Teachers Hub, I think. Or,
she might be. Yeah. She's in Seattle. Does that sound familiar?
Not Mary McFarland?
Yes, it is. It is.
She's the moderator, if you will, for the Morphology Teachers Hub. Facebook.
Yeah, she was pretty fabulous.
Yes, we really enjoyed her. We were telling her she needs to come back for like a full show. Okay, so my favorite question to ask people is if you had one wish that you could grant for our students and maybe teachers who provide the instruction, what would it be and why?
So if I could have one wish, it would be that everyone would understand that, number one, morphology is this framework and foundation for the system. And number two, that the spelling of words is showing us what that word is. It's giving us the identity of the word. And that it goes beyond pronunciation. And then third, and kind of to bring it together, really, it's that spoken language and written language are, of course, related, but there isn't this one-to-one relationship. And so the more we can learn about how the written language works, the more we are all going to be better equipped to spell, read, and comprehend, teachers and students. So that was a long one wish.
That's all right. It's multifaceted.
Okay. I love that. And I think I actually need to get better at reading myself. I was always a good reader, but I never was very good at vocabulary development. That was always a weakness of mine. And the way they taught us in school was we just had the words. Yeah, right? We just had the words that we had to memorize. And I never connected with it. I never could really remember the words for a test, and the test would show that you mastered or didn't master it. And I always struggled with that. So even though I feel like just in conversation, my vocabulary is fine.
Your vocabulary is great.
I would love to have better vocabulary in writing.
I think you would really enjoy what you can do with morphology, honestly.
I think so too. I'm so excited with all these things you're telling me and the books and your resource and all the books that you gave us to refer back to. I'm seriously very excited by this. I mean,
maybe we should have a date. We do a morphology
I was
date.
like, what are you saying?
We can invite Sue.
Okay, there you go.
A morphology date sounds like a great idea.
No, I love all this. So when our listeners go to buy your book, where can they find your book?
They can find it on Amazon. It's also carried by Kendor Learning. I think you talked with Jennifer Hasser.
We did, yeah.
She carries it there. And then if listeners happen to be in Australia, there are a couple of distributors in Australia.
We do have some listeners in Australia.
If you go to my website, you can see all the places to get it. But Amazon is the easiest to get it. It's available there. So,
okay, yay!
Wow,
I'm excited, and we're gonna call you for our date.
I would love that. I tell people all the time when I speak at conferences, I say, the only reason I have friends at home is because I get to come here and talk about spelling with all you guys. Because otherwise, people would be like, really, we need to move on past the spelling.
That's awesome.
Well, you can come down here where it's warm,
Okay, I like that.
It's even warm today, which probably why there's going to be tornadoes. But, there you go. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful. I really appreciate your time and all of our audio mishaps that have been going on. So
I really appreciate your time, and I love the work you're doing and the work that you're doing to help people understand dyslexia and how to support students with dyslexia and all students, really. It's really needed work. So thank you.
Thank you. So this is Amy.
And Melissa.
And we're the Dyslexia Duo. Bye. The Dyslexia Duo podcast hosts are Amy Rodenroth,
Melissa Dean.
Our producer is Greg Rodenroth.
You can find us on Facebook at The Dyslexia Duo.
Email us any questions or comments at thedyslexiaduo@gmail.com.
Awareness is so important. Share this podcast with your friends,
family,
and teachers.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.